In this episode in the series about the 1969 Melbourne Transportation Plan, we are going to look at the F14. This was quite possibly the longest of all the proposed freeways, running all the way from Melbourne Airport down to Hallam. Most of this was eventually built in sections, and today are some of the busiest roads in the entire state. Because it's so big, we're going to look at it in three different sections. The first will be from Tullamarine to Docklands, the second from Docklands to East Malvern, and the third from East Malvern to Hallam. So let's take a look at the F14, one of Melbourne's forgotten freeways. This section of the F14 is today known as the M2. It is made up of the Tullamarine Freeway and Citylink from Melbourne Airport through to where Citylink terminates at the Westgate Freeway. Plans for some kind of major road along this alignment were first confirmed back in the late 1940s and early 50s. But it took many years of design, land acquisition and funding by the Country Roads Board before it was complete. The first part to be built was in 1966 from the still under construction Tullamarine Airport, or Jetport as it was then known, and is in fact considered to be Melbourne's very first freeway. It was termed the Tullamarine Freeway Bypass Road and built in various stages across several years, with the first whole segment from Tullamarine to Flemington Bridge opening to traffic in 1970, which was actually the same year that the new Tullamarine Airport opened as well. It was built as a 4-lane dual carriageway controlled access road, meaning no traffic signals, and heralded the beginning of decades of intense and continuous freeway construction and expansion that continues to this day. The section of freeway south of Bell Street was expanded as part of Citylink in 2000. This resulted in the existing Tullamarine Freeway being extended about 5 kilometres further south from Flemington Bridge to terminate at an interchange with the new Westgate Freeway. This connected it to the new Domain and Burnley tunnels that ran through to the Monash Freeway further east. This included adding lanes to the Tullamarine Freeway and constructing a new elevated road structure, the Baldy Bridge and interchange ramps. Construction of the elevated sections resulted in the Upfield railway line being closed for an entire 10 months south of Flemington Bridge, and the flora and fauna around Moonee Ponds Creek being severely impacted. This second section between the southern end of Citylink and the Monash Freeway in Caulfield is the part of the F14 that was never built. It was one of many routes that were cancelled by Premier Rupert Hamer in 1973. So let's take a look at this one in a little bit more detail. Starting at the northern end, if you look at the present day alignment of Citylink, you will notice that it curves westwards just after Arden Street. This was not part of the original F14 alignment, which would have followed the railway past North Melbourne Station. The old alignment is actually where the Wurundjeri Woi extension is currently being built as part of the Westgate Tunnel project. Yet another example of the 1969 Melbourne Transportation Plan being implemented today. From Arden Street, the F14 would have diverged slightly from the railway at around Dudley Street and gone slightly west along the former Docklands or Footscray Road, which is roughly along where Harbour Esplanade in Docklands is today. At the time, this was a huge area of port facilities and industrial buildings. Had the freeway been built here, it's likely that it would have had a major impact on how Docklands was planned and developed in the 1990s and 2000s. In fact, the original Docklands strategy of 1989 stated that the roads would, quote, cut a swathe through Docklands which increasingly alienates the waterfront from the central activity district and, quote, as Docklands develops, it will be an intimidating barrier to pedestrians. As a result, the strategy recommended 3 options to solve this issue. Option 1, rebuild Docklands Road at a tunnel. Option 2, reroute the road further east adjacent to the railway along a new tree-lined boulevard. Or option 3, construct a bypass road to the west connecting the Tullamarine and Westgate freeways. It's interesting to note here that 2 of these 3 options were actually carried out, and it's arguable that this is one of the parts of the 1969 Melbourne Transportation Plan that was actually built twice. Citylink today comprises the Western Bypass Road envisaged by the 1969 plan and the Dockland strategy, with Wurundjeri Woi being the second option that proposed rerouting Docklands Road. In a way, they both fulfil the same function that the F14 would have done, just in two different places on either side of the original alignment. Combined, they provide 12 traffic lanes, many more than were originally envisaged. Returning to the 1969 plan, the connection south from Docklands across the Yarra River for the F14 would have followed the deviation of the original Cowper Street slightly east, which you can see here on this 1968 planning scheme map. Today, this alignment is still used by Waterview Walk and the southern end of Batmans Hill Drive. There would have then been a tunnel or bridge across the river from here to the site of the present-day Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. This was a departure from the previous plan for an inner-city ring road from the 1954 Metropolitan Planning Scheme. This plan had the crossing further west to connect with Johnson Street, roughly where the Webb Bridge is situated today. After crossing the river, the F14 would have followed Ferraz Street and Canterbury Road all the way down to St Kilda, and converted these existing thoroughfares to a freeway standard. This would have continued all the way along the St Kilda railway line and past Albert Park to Fitzroy Street in St Kilda. This was one of the most controversial sections of Freeway, and from here we can start to see why. East of Fitzroy Street, the F14 turned due east to follow an alignment roughly between Alma Road and Inkerman Street that would have demolished thousands of houses and other properties. It's possible that some parts may have been built in a tunnel or trench, but this still would have had significant impacts on these inner city areas, especially at the interchange with the proposed F2 freeway just north of Balaclava Station, or roughly where Raglan Street is today. After intersecting with Dandenong Road at Caulfield, the F14 would have continued its way through leafy suburbia through to Gardeners Creek at East Malvern Station. Here it would have intersected with the proposed F6 freeway. If you're interested in learning more about this north-south freeway, check out my video linked here in the top right-hand corner. From this spot, we move into the third and final section of the F14 from East Malvern to Hallam. This is the other part of the F14 that has been built today. As I've mentioned in previous videos, what we today know as the Monash Freeway and the southern part of Citylink was in fact designated as three separate freeways in the 1969 Melbourne Transportation Plan. From Caulfield, this route was part of the F14. This section was built sporadically in separate projects throughout the mid to late 20th century under various names, including the Mulgrave Freeway, Southeastern Freeway and Southeastern Arterial. The first real attempt for this part of the F14 was made in 1972, when the Mulgrave and Tullamarine Freeways were constructed between the Princes Highway at Hallam and Stud Road in Dandenong North. It was then progressively extended towards the city in 1974, 1976, 1977, 1979 and 1981 to terminate at Warrigal Road in Malvern. The Southeastern Freeway had previously been built at the city end up to Toorak Road in 1972, and the completion of the Mulgrave Freeway up to Warrigal Road created a gap in between the two freeways. One of the main reasons why appears to be what I mentioned before, that these were originally planned to be three separate freeways. Here you can see how the F14 was only meant to be built up to Warrigal Road before turning west, and the F9 only just past Toorak Road before turning east towards Hillsville. As the F6 freeway was cancelled quite early, there was no land reservation present by the time the rest of the F14 and F9 were completed. This led to the construction of the Southeastern Arterial, which was built with at-grade intersections and traffic signals, not as a freeway. This was done deliberately in an attempt to placate some of the significant community resistance. Many were concerned about noise, air pollution and property acquisitions as a result of the construction of freeways through what was previously a relatively peaceful creek corridor and residential neighbourhood. However, the traffic signals did not last very long. The combination of the new freeways, induced demand, and ongoing residential expansion in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne meant that the new roads rapidly became congested. As a result, not 5 years after the arterial was constructed, more projects were implemented to increase the capacity of the road and upgrade it to a freeway. This was done from 1993, and by 1997, all of the at-grade intersections had been removed. At this point, it was renamed to the Southeastern Freeway before being changed again just 2 years later in 1999 to the Monash Freeway. Despite this almost continuous construction since 1970, the Monash Freeway has continued to see further expansions and widenings worth many billions of dollars. These include the Hallam bypass, which was built from 1999 to 2003, the addition of extra lanes in 2007 to 2010, and the latest Monash Freeway widenings adding extra lanes that began in 2016 and is scheduled to finish by the end of this year. Today, this section of the F14 carries over 160,000 vehicles per day and remains one of the longest pieces of the original 1969 Melbourne Transportation Plan that has been built. The F14, had it been built in its entirety, would have been one of Melbourne's longest and possibly busiest freeways. It would also have been one of the most destructive, carving out swathes of the inner city that today are some of the most sought after and preserved suburbs in Melbourne. And as we saw earlier, bits and pieces are still being built and expanded right up to the present day, as the slow but sure implementation of the 1969 Melbourne Transportation Plan continues. That brings us to the end of this video in the series about proposed freeways in the 1969 Melbourne Transportation Plan. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this so that you can stay up to date on the latest videos and continue to support this channel. As always, check out the video description for more information and see the playlist linked up here for more in the series. Thanks so much for watching and see you next time.